So what is the solution? It's to repeal your growth policy. Now, if you take a look at 76-2-201, it says County Zoning Authorized. A Board of County Commissioners that has adopted a growth policy pursuant to Chapter 1 is authorized to adopt zoning regulations. So it's really the key. Without the growth policy, they don't have the authorization to put the zoning in place. So if you go to 76-1-604, this is adoption, revision, or rejection of a growth policy. This is what we used in order to stop the zoning and repeal our growth policy. The qualified electors of the area covered by the growth policy may, by initiative or referendum, and those are Montana state constitutional rights, and you can do this in about 22 states. Unfortunately, you probably can't do them in very many of the states on the other side of the Mississippi. Most of the new states who came into the Union, they adopted this in their state constitutions. But you can go to your state constitution, take a look for initiative or referendum, and if you have that tool, you can utilize it to be instrumental in your law or even changing your state constitution. There's usually a process for initiative or referendum in states that allow it. So there's a website out there, I believe it's INR.com. It stands for Initiative and Referendum. But go take a look at that on Google, and they go down through all the states and which powers they have. So you may revise or repeal a growth policy under this section. A petition for initiative or referendum must contain the signatures of 15% of the qualified electors of the area covered by the growth policy. Now, this is one of the main reasons why we decided to get rid of the growth policy, is because it's only the area covered by the growth policy. So the growth policy is a county growth policy. It doesn't have the legal ability to cover the cities, the incorporated cities, and so this was only going to be able to be voted on by the people who it would affect. And if you think about it, the reason why they want you to vote on zoning is because people in cities, why would they care whether or not you have regulations on your property out in the county? It doesn't affect them in any way, shape, or form. And secondly, it seems like a lot of the cities are a more liberal area, if that's the word you want to use, and so they might be more for the zoning. So in a way, they're gerrymandering the vote in order to make sure you lose. So this is really the best way to go about it, and in your state it might be called a master plan or Vision 2020 or comprehensive plan. There's lots of names for these. But go take a look at your law in your local state and figure out how you can stop your zoning. And this is really the best way to do it, because instead of going after every zoning regulation with initiative or referendum, initiative being to initiate a law and referendum simply meaning to repeal the law. So what we did is we repealed the growth policy. It's the best way to go because it's one fight, one time with the right people, and it takes away the authority for them to just sit down in 5 or 10 minutes and go ahead and give another zoning regulation that'll take you a year or two to fight out. So what they really would try to do under the zoning is just basically wear you out, get you to the point that, you know, because of constraints with family time or monetarily or the fact that most people have to work for a living all day long instead of fighting politics, they would really like to just throw as much at you as they can and just wear you out to the point that you really have no ability to fight them anymore. One of the things that you'll probably hear is, why not write a good growth policy? As soon as the growth policy repeal was successful, I got a lot of phone calls, and everyone wanted me to come to the table and sit down and write a good growth policy. Well, we had a Ravalli County attorney's opinion, and his opinion's a lot like an attorney general opinion. Once he gives it, then it's kind of like law. It stands until a court or the attorney general overrides his opinion, or it's legislated differently. And so here is a question that he was asked Do the statements regarding property rights set forth in Ravalli County's growth policy prohibit adoption of lawful zoning? And so a lot of Republicans sat down, and Democrats, and they did write a growth policy, and it's pretty interesting. If you go and take a look at the Ravalli County growth policy, it says property rights in almost every paragraph. And so they figured, well, if we put the words property rights in our growth policy, then that will protect us. Well, here's what our county attorney's opinion was. Ravalli County's growth policy specifically states that it recognizes those private property rights. Accordingly, the reiteration of those rights does not preclude enactment of lawful zoning regulations under 76-2-201. So to sum up what that really means is he's basically saying if it protects, or if it's lawful zoning, anything that they write or legislate into law that's lawful protects your private property rights. And so writing private property rights in your growth policy really doesn't mean anything whatsoever. He goes on to state, a growth policy is a condition precedent to permanent zoning. So you see, he's admitting right here in his opinion that it is the key. Without the growth policy, you can't have permanent zoning. There is nothing in the statutes supporting the argument that the growth policy provisions may deny the authority of a county to enact zoning, because zoning is the primary way a county implements a growth policy. And so one of the main arguments that you'll hear over and over is that this is not a regulatory document. The growth policy is just a standalone document. It doesn't have any teeth. But what you see here is that the county attorney has stated that really you need the growth policy to have zoning, number one, and number two, the way you implement the growth policy is zoning. So it is just a key, and it says in here that you can't deny the authority of the county to enact zoning in the growth policy. So you can't say in your growth policy, well, we don't want this kind of zoning, we don't want that kind of zoning. So all of those words and everything that you put in your growth policy really don't mean anything. You could pretty much have a growth policy that just says growth policy, the end, and they could come and act zoning on you. That's what they need. They just need the key. And so if you go sit down in these committees and go to the table with them, all you're doing is facilitating them getting the key, and once they have the key, of course, they will go do whatever they want and have as harsh of regulations as they want without your consent.